Hindsight is obviously 2020, but then that kind of makes at least it's yours this week and not mine.
There must be a delivery at the door. Hold on, Dan.
Thankfully, technology has become such a big part of the game. My dog is...
Hello, doggy.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fans, and welcome back to another edition of Third Degree, the podcast. Peter is not with us this week, but I'm here with Buzz to get you through another week. Buzz, how are you?
I'm good. I was going to say today I'm calling in from FC Dallas training up in Frisco, but as you well know...
No, we're not allowed.
Yeah, we've been banned since March from going up there, despite the fact that lots of other people go and watch. Media are not allowed to, so... We're dealing with a lot of distance coverage of the team and using social media and pictures and B-roll and stuff they put out to try and garner information, but we'll do our best.
Funny story about that. I was asked if I'd been to a practice or I had a doppelganger. Apparently someone that looked like me was hanging out next to Reto Ziegler's car, and I was like, no, that would be kind of dumb. Why would I do that?
Yeah, we don't want to lose our credentials. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's been an interesting week. North Texas are back. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little down the line. But we had a pretty interesting rumor this week with FC Dallas possibly coming back for a 3-game series with Nashville, the COVID Classico. We heard a little bit through the week about a possible game next Friday, and you'd mentioned that you'd heard something similar. So what are we looking at potentially?
Well, the rumbles that we're getting both from people I know here in Dallas, my connections in Dallas, and from people that are similar to us from Nashville that are hearing things, but reporters and people that cover the Nashville teams, is that there's a game next Friday here in Frisco. It would be the first of the 3 makeup games. None of this is official, of course. There's been no announcement, but when you're hearing it from both ends, there's probably some great validity to it. So we're operating in the assumption that it's going to happen. And today there was even some noise out of Nashville that all 3 of the makeup games are going to be in Dallas. So I can't verify that part. I haven't been able to verify that part, but it's coming out of Nashville that that's the case. And on a competitive level, that makes no sense at all. What a disadvantage for Nashville. But in a COVID sense of once you get the team here, Nashville that is, the travel is the dangerous part where you get exposed. So once you get them here and you have training facilities that are huge so that they could train away from people too, and there's tons of hotels in Frisco. So in the COVID sense, that does make sense. But again, that's not verified, and none of it's verified, in fact. But, as much as we can say for sure, it sounds like there's a game next Friday.
Yeah, and Lucci sort of mentioned on his call something about gearing up for next Friday, kind of cryptic, and then, sort of shied away from it. So, that seems like it could be a possibility. And yeah, Frisco definitely offers a great mini bubble with the 3 hotels now that are all on each side of the training ground. So, definitely if they wanted to play it that way, it kind of sucks for Nashville, giving up a little bit of a home advantage. Although, from what we've seen, they've lost both of their games so far and haven't played in a while. So I guess it's kind of a crapshoot those first few games anyway.
Well, yeah, in a COVID world where you might have 1,000 people in the stands, I mean, really, do you have much home field advantage? I mean, other than the discomfort of being in a hotel, really, that's all there is. It's warm here, but it's warm in Nashville too, so it's not that.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely be interesting. Like I say, I don't think there's too much of a, we're not talking about guys sleeping 4 to a room in a Motel 6 or anything. It's,
No.
For an extended period. We're still talking about, decent 3.5, 4-star hotels and a lush training facility. So I mean, yeah, it's and there's obviously, will there even be fans with everything going on? Will MLS even permit that?
That's a very good question because that's the rumbles we hear, at least that I hear, is that it's up to the league now to give final approval for this idea. That effectively, what I understand is that the teams are saying yes, that's fine, at least the next Friday part, and the league has to pull the trigger. And now we are talking about literally a week from now, but it doesn't take that much to open up a stadium just for a game. In terms of the player personnel and the production, the operations people. If you want to get into ticket things, now that's a little more complicated, and maybe that's going to be tough for FC Dallas to pull off in a week. I don't know. We have yet to hear a league relaunch plan, so we don't know how they're going to handle tickets and fans league-wide. I know that there's been some discussion with season ticket holders because I am one of those people, and so I've had discussions with my rep about what could happen going forward. So it's going to be a big play it by ear kind of scenario. I would imagine that like every other game this season, that it'll be on TV or stream or something. So even if we can't go sit in the stands, we'll be able to watch the game. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a whole lot of point in doing the game if you're not going to at least not have fans in the stands, and if you're not going to meet your media requirements in terms of your sponsorships. It's like, why would you bother playing next week other than to get them out of the way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's always worth pointing out, as well as the stuff for season ticket holders, every single person in the club's database has been sent an email survey about, do you feel comfortable going back to games? Do you like the fake crowd noise? And how many games have you been to? How many games do you watch on TV? Or this, that, and the other. So they're definitely gearing up for some kind of decision there.
Yeah, and we have to give them a lot of leeway, I think. This is all seat of the pants. It's all crazy. You can't hold them to the fire if it's not perfect. It's like the bubble thing in Orlando. They're going to do their best, and so we're going to give them a lot of leeway. At this point, we're just reaching for information of what things are, and all we can really say at this point is it looks like the team's playing next Friday.
And then we'll criticize them after.
Yeah, well, criticizing for play on the field is different. That's not operations.
We can make all the attendance jokes afterwards. It's fine.
Yeah, there may not be a whole lot of difference, right? That's a joke everyone wants to make about SC Dallas.
Yeah, so I guess, moving on to the actual opponent itself, potential opponent, Nashville. Haven't seen a whole lot of them, just the two games, a 2-1 loss at home to Atlanta and then a 1-0 loss in Portland. A few FC Dallas links with Dax McCarty, Walker Zimmerman, and Dominique Bargy. And Walker Zimmerman, the only goal scorer in Nashville SC history, or MLS version of Nashville SC anyway.
Right. Well, it seemed pretty clear in terms of their squad building and their team building that they went with a defensive first mentality for this, as they put their roster together in the first place. I mean, they were relying on Dom Badji and David Akam for striking and attacking. And other than Dax in the midfield, I don't know that they really have anybody that can pull the strings and play, aggressive, attacking, exciting, interesting soccer. So, they're a working project, as all expansion teams are. They might be better than Inter Miami. I don't know. They're right there with FC Cincinnati for last year for not being a very good expansion team. So,
yeah,
they're going to probably play very defensive and park the bus coming into Dallas, I would imagine.
Yeah, like I say, very defensive first team, relatively strong back line with obviously Zimmerman, the headline there. Dax and Anibal Godoy as your kind of your anchor midfielders. Looking at when they played Atlanta in that first game, Portland away in the last game, they played a very high line, almost like a flat 4-4-2. You could be forgiven for calling it a 6-2-2. It was that compact and that defensive. But yeah, not a whole lot going forward. They've signed Haney Mukhtar as a DP. He's kind of been the only one pulling the strings. David Akam always loves to score against FC Dallas, so don't be surprised if he suddenly becomes a competent footballer again.
Yeah, at the very least, I would expect them to sit deep and counterattack at this point. That would be my expectation coming in. And I would imagine you'll see a game where Dallas will dominate possession, and they'll spend a lot of time in the Nashville half trying to break down the opposition and break down that low block or mid block, whichever block they end up running, probably right inside their own half, I would imagine. Because Dallas isn't, from their strikers, their nines, Dallas isn't an over-the-top team. The attacking width comes from the wings, and the get behind comes from the wings. So I would anticipate sort of a mid to low block, but we'll see. We'll
And
see
we've
how it
talked
goes.
about that kind of diagonal run that catches Retta Ziegler off guard quite a bit. With Akam and Baji up top, I wouldn't be shocked to see, and then Abi Danladi coming off the bench as well. I wouldn't be surprised if the strikers stay wide and both try and make that same diagonal run off both wings to try and catch FC Dallas on the break and, create that little bit of uncertainty between the defensive midfielder and the wing back.
Yeah, that actually leads me to a question we'll get to later, which is formation. And we'll get down to it in a minute, and we'll talk about why we think we might see one formation or another out of Dallas based on that.
Oh, that's just tease.
That's a tease, yeah.
Well, then, in that case, who do we think is going to play on the Dallas side?
Well, the one person we think is not going to play is Franco Jara because there was some discussion from FC Dallas that he was working on the side this week, doing his because of a small injury. They seem to be downplaying that it was no big deal, which is fine. But, he and the team and everyone else has talked about how he would have to come in and work to get fit and work to get himself into the team and learn the system. We know for sure when you pay what you pay in him, he's going to start at some point, but I don't expect it to be this week. I doubt he's even going to train with the team this week probably. And even off the field, the guy's really distracted. Like there was some stuff on Instagram where like his furniture got delivered yesterday, I think it was, and he's got a pregnant wife and there's all this COVID running around the team. So, I mean, you can imagine that the guy may not be 100% buying in yet, in terms of like full team integration and 100% health and 100% ready to go. So that means, of course, that we're going to ride the Cobra train. Cobra's going to be the guy. So that's a pretty straightforward idea up top as striker. I don't think Hara will even make the bench at this point. I think he will it'll just be Cobra and Pepe for the front line. And then, of course, Barrios on one side and Fafa Pico on the other if you're staying in a 4-3-3. And the real battle, Dan, and I'd be interested in your take on this too, is Jesus Ferreira versus Paxton Pomykal. And we knew after the first two games that Pomykal was up. It was going to be his turn, basically, in the lineup, and he was going to start in New York. Now, all that got thrown out of the window, and that was months ago, but I imagine that Lucci will have in his mind the same thinking that it was Paxton's ready to go and it's his turn. And, he had earned through training and Jesus through his not great play was going to sit down and you would see Paxton Pomykal be in that free 8 position.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Obviously, there's a lot of variables. We know that Ferreira got the virus and we know that he's passed the test that there's no lasting damage, but you're still talking about a virus where most people who get it say, hey, you're like maybe 85% for 6 weeks after it. So then that's a significant time out of being like in peak condition where, Pomykal may have pulled ahead or, maybe Lucci's thinking drop Pomykal further back like he wanted to do last year. There are a lot of variables, but, the thing that really interested me is you said if they played the 4-3-3.
Yeah, well, we know that from the early spring training, when we were allowed to go to training all the time, that they spent, not half the time, but they spent a good chunk, let's say a third of the time, working on a 3-5-2 in the spring training. And we know from observations for week 3, again, when they were going to play in New York, that they were going to use that 3-5-2, or sorry, a 3-man back line. I shouldn't say 3-5-2. It might be a 3-4-3, a 3-man back line with Brisson being the third player that comes in there. Moving Hollingshead and Cannon out to wing back. So that is still 100% in the mix. And both Lucci and Ziegler have talked about how the team wants to have that ability to use that formation for a given game or even it and the other formation in a single game, through a sub or just a swapping of personnel. And the reason I think there's a good chance you might see it against Nashville comes back to your take a few minutes ago about Baji and Akam playing sort of as a two-man striker group, particularly one that might play a little wider and go at Ziegler and go at those gaps. Mm-hmm. And a 3-man back line helps with that because when you have a two-striker system opposite you and you can put 3 center backs out there, basically, that fills some of those gaps and gives you an extra body to help defend against those 2 strikers. So there's a, we can't watch training anymore, so we can't be more definitive than that. But it sure seems like it's a distinct possibility that you're going to see a 3-man back line. Now, whether it's a 3-5-2 with a 2 strikers and a number 10, or more likely, I think, a 3-4-3, where you would have Hollingshead and Cannon wide, and then you would still have Thiago Santos and Brian Acosta probably, because he's the veteran with the World Cup experience. And then in front of him, the 2 variations would be, a number 10 and 2 strikers, which could be like a Cobra Barrios with a Pomical behind, or it could be the regular 3-4-3 where you might have Barrios, Cobra, and Pico on the left, or Paxton on the left. So which version of that you might see will be an interesting question, because they can do both quite easily. They both fit their system. The 3-5-2 version, you keep your triple pivot in the middle, that Lucci likes. The 3-4-3, you keep your double wings, which Lucci likes. So it'll be interesting to see which one of those we actually see.
Definitely. And, when we talk about the possibility of this, obviously we're not just kind of throwing crap at the wall here. In the Philadelphia game, they switched to a back 3 or back 5, however you really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Lucci in the press conference, what he saw from it. And it came down to quite simply Philadelphia play with two strikers, which Nashville, they technically play a 4-2-3-1, but it really ends up as 2 strikers. So you add the third defender in, and he can swing. There is your 2 players are marking, and then one can attack. One can attack the ball, and start the play from the back. Spread it out to the wing, spread it out to the centre midfield. So it's definitely something that, looking at the way they line up, it seems a fairly favourable option for Dallas to at least have that in their back pocket.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think your assessment is correct too. When you have Baji as one of your wingers, or as your 9, and you have Akam as one of your wingers or one of your 9, both those guys have the same instinct, which is to come inside and come camp in that center channel right off of the 9. Baji did that with FC Dallas all the time last year when he was playing as a winger. He rarely played as a conventional winger. He almost always drifted in as a second striker. So it's more than likely that while technically, as you say, it might show as a 4-2-3-1, it's like we know that they're going to have 2 guys running a high line trying to get behind the defense. And between Ziegler, Hedges, and Brisson, none of those 3 guys are notably fast. They're not. Ziegler maybe is a touch slow, and Hedges is perfectly quick enough, but none of them are like, going to go head-to-head with Baji kind of pace. So there'll be some conservativeness to their back line play, and I think actually the 3-man center backs lends itself to that.
Definitely, absolutely. And, probably for another episode, or when I eventually do the breakdown that I've been promising I will do for the blog on that 3-man back line. It is on its way, I promise. There are definitely some effects that players like going forward. Some things that Paxton Pomykal said to me. Actually, one last thing on the 3-man back line. I spoke to Jimmy Mara on a team Zoom call recently, and I asked him about it, and he was like, 3-man back line really doesn't matter to me. The formation, it's just some numbers. It's a very fluid situation. It's interesting because your formation used to be everything. Rigidity was like key. If you lost your shape in a game, you were screwed. And now the game's evolved so much, and particularly with progressive coaches like Lucci, where we talk about the 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. Let's be honest, it's going to be the same thing. And the 4-2-3-1 is a 4-3-3. It's just how they could advance and come back.
And think about when Dallas is playing in the 4-3-3 or whatever version of it you want, when they build out, their wings go up and their center backs split wide, one of those holding mids drops back into the hole, and you effectively get a 3-man back line as you build forward. So, as you say, these formations are fluid and tactics are fluid, and Dallas actually is really known for that formation compressing, that back line becoming a 5 or becoming and then moving forward, is all of a sudden it's a 2. It just depends on the fluidity of the situation and the up and down situation. And it'll be fun to watch because I have an impression that Nashville's a very direct team, a very old school track meet kind of team, and not particularly nuanced and flexible or possession oriented. So it'll be interesting to watch that conflict.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at the numbers early on, they definitely had a high number of crosses and a high number of long balls. So,
Old school.
You should see Matt Hedges get his head on an awful lot of balls.
Yeah, you would think.
That sounded wrong. Sorry.
That's so dirty.
If only Peter was here to laugh at that one.
Yeah.
I guess we just mentioned Jimmy Mara. Obviously, Jesse Gonzalez currently out the picture with his suspension. Carlos Avilez down with North Texas. So how's that goalkeeper situation really looking forward, going forward?
Yeah, the big problem is that right now, and Lucci's mentioned this a couple of times, is that they have had to stop the transition between North Texas and FC Dallas, and not even just North Texas, between the academy and FC Dallas too. The idea in the past where they would bring guys into first team training, whether it be North Texas players or academy players, that idea has gone away. And the same's true of FC Dallas players going down to North Texas because of COVID. It's pretty obvious. Like when you go down to the other team, you've blown your own little internal bubble apart and expose yourself to the other team. And so you then have to isolate for, I don't know what it is, a week, 2 weeks, who knows? So like if you go down just to play a game and can't come back for 2 weeks, you have to go sit on, and not even train, you have to go sit on the side isolated for 2 weeks, be quarantined for 2 weeks. So no one's doing that right now, which is why it's interesting that Carlos Avilez is back with North Texas, that he's been training with North Texas and he was on the bench. They went with Zamundio in the first game, who had been there the whole time, of course, because Carlos was with FC Dallas. So I had talked about on this podcast and other locations that signing Avilez once Jesse was out, suspended, was okay, kid, here's a chance. Can you step up? Can you bring your level up to the first team? Can we make do through this season with you as our third choice? And I think the fact that he's gone back to North Texas means the answer to that question is no, because you can technically go with just two keepers. You could. But what happens now if Jimmy or Kyle Zovek gets hurt, even if it's a minor injury? You're going to go into the game with no bench keeper. You can't bring in an MLS keeper, I don't think, because they're not going to have been in your bubble. You can't bring in a guy for a game, right? That makes no sense.
Yeah,
so,
the situation Vancouver has been short on goalkeepers, or was it Montreal, one or the other? And they've got the pool keeper in the bubble. So the pool keeper's, he's fine, but having the pool keeper fly in from wherever to Dallas, they've naturally got a quarantine.
Yeah,
you can't just jump into the side.
You'd have to isolate him for a week or two before he could even. And how does that work if it's like, oh, Jimmy's tweaked a hammy, he just needs like a week off. He's got some tightness. Well, that doesn't work, right? So the answer is they need a third keeper. So like Avilez's presence with North Texas means he's staying with North Texas. That means that no, short term he wasn't the answer, which is not bad necessarily for his career, by the way. He's just 21, got lots of time to progress, so he can go play with North Texas. But it means that windows opening, it means that, in my mind, it means that FC Dallas is going to go get a keeper. Now, are they going to go get a keeper like a pool keeper, like a third keeper, a backup keeper, or are they going to go and try and get a full legit compete with Jimmy for the first job replacement for Jesse? That's a bigger question, and probably we will not know the answer until FC Dallas tells us something about Jesse. But internally, they know the answer to that question already, I would imagine. And I know for a fact that they've been looking at keepers just because it's part of your job, number one, to do due diligence. The minute Jesse got suspended, they started looking at keepers. I guarantee it. And I know for a fact that that's true. So I am now convinced, because Avilez is back with North Texas, that Dallas will go after a keeper of some kind in this window, this next coming window that'll open up soon. And I don't think that'll be the only player they go after. I think they'll go after another player too if they can find somebody, because we've talked about this a lot, Dan, that the market's about to be flooded with players, and this will affect somebody else with Dallas in a minute. Teams worldwide are going to be cutting payroll. There's going to be a bunch of players that are going to be surprisingly available. And so I think Dallas will keep their eye open and grab somebody unexpected in this window.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing in Europe now that, some teams had given like month or two extensions to players who are coming out of contract to complete the seasons there, and now they're having to to come back to him and say, hey, look, with all this, we've lost X amount of money. We're going to have to cut you X. Here's your new contract. It's not the value you were on, which, for a lot of players, just means they're going. If it is MLS a potential destination for those players, absolutely. We do know that goalkeeper's not a position you really want to waste an international roster spot on. It's gonna be very interesting to see what happens, especially with, like you say, with the outfield positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a player, if you're a keeper that's let's say you're in the USL Championship, perhaps, or if you're sitting on someone else's bench and now you see an opportunity for, if I go into Dallas, maybe I can compete. I mean, maybe it is just a short-term shot, but I look at Jimmy Maurer and think that's a guy I can beat out potentially. I have a lot of faith in Jimmy Maurer, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying if you're a young, hot, up-and-coming keeper who feels like they're not getting a chance at, let's say, USL Championship or an MLS bench somewhere, maybe you might want to jump on an opportunity to come to Dallas. And that's true worldwide too. If you can find a player, particularly one that could get a green card relatively quickly, the stability of the United States and the paychecks arriving every day in a time when COVID has made already volatile markets even more volatile. There's an appeal. So I definitely think you should keep an eye out for keepers coming into Dallas this summer.
And talking about European clubs maybe looking for lower cost alternatives, we've had the constant story of Reggie Cannon. How do you see this being affected?
Well, unfortunately for Reggie, we know worldwide the market's going to be down. There's going to be a flood of players, and the prices are going to drop. Now, that may make Dallas less willing to sell because Reggie's value probably just went from, in my mind, $3 million down to, I don't know, 1, maybe 1.5. And will Dallas take that? But the bigger question is that according to my sources, Dallas does not have a legitimate, solid offer for Reggie Cannon on the table. They've had inquiries. There are teams that are interested, but no one has put in a bid for Reggie yet. So, this club and we on the outside need to start thinking about the possibility that because of his decline in value and because of the glut of players that are going to be available for free, that there's a good chance Reggie's not going anywhere.
This is a completely different situation for really every other aspect, but it's kind of like how it was with Kellyn Acosta when everyone was talking about there's so much interest abroad. And, I remember I was speaking to Dan Hunt and he was like, it's weird. We've had so many inquiries, not one offer.
Yeah, it's
everyone
the same
wants
kind
to
of
know
thing.
what he's worth or, is he really available? But no one's been willing to push the button on it.
Yeah, we've literally heard about 4 or 5 different clubs in Germany. I have, and there was also been clubs from other countries mentioned. But right now there's no bid on the table. Now, does that mean that there haven't been people that have said, well, what if we came in for this? Would you do it? That's different than saying here's a number. And that's what they don't have. Mm-hmm. They have people that have, as you say, they've called and kicked the tires and said, could we really get him? And then they go back and they think about what they want to do, and then maybe they get somebody else, or maybe they double down on the guy they have, because right now they don't want to pay $1 million or $3 million or whatever it is that Dallas has evaluated him. I think the number was 3. That's just my opinion, but you're not going to get that now. So is Dallas going to want to sit on him and not send him away? They've got him for I can't remember the contract off the top of my head. It's like 3 years now, maybe, but we know that it accelerates to like $500,000. That's a lot of money for an outside back. $500,000 next year. So there's an incentive for Dallas to move him, but they're not going to give him away for peanuts either. So I think there's a good chance that Reggie's going to play out this season at least, and maybe further.
I mean, it's simultaneously the best and worst problem to have with when it comes to the salary cap and the talent level.
Yeah, it's important to remember too that Dallas has pressure from below because of the fact that they want this system to work, this build players and then sell players system, this whole pipeline, this whole treadmill of players. Reggie right now is a roadblock to that idea at his position. Brian Reynolds is ready for playing time. They just signed Eddie Munjoma. They need to find out whether he's going to be legit. They let Kevin Bonilla go to college, and maybe he's a one-and-done kind of guy. They got guys coming up. There's a kid at the U19 that I've heard good things about. I haven't seen him only a couple times, so I'm not 100% convinced yet, but people tell me that he's legit. And then you can go on down through the system of, there's a train of guys coming up, and this is true at every position. But Reggie's currently one of those roadblocks, and if you want to be a selling team, which the Hunts do, at some point, you got to sell some people, and Reggie really wants to go. So they need to get this, get something done, and I'm just afraid that the market has died and Reggie's going to be stuck.
Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but now it just looks like the structure in that contract may have been a mistake. Although obviously going into it, it's a come and buy him move. It appeases the player, it appeases the budget. It was kind of in the best interest of everyone going into it.
Yeah, I think it's only going to be a bit negative thing because of the pandemic. If the pandemic doesn't happen, then this is not even a thing. It's only with this unforeseeable, cataclysmic worldwide problem that that's wrecked the business model worldwide that this is now going to maybe be a little bit of a problem. But Dallas has plenty of TAM and GAM, so they can buy guys down. So I think that they'll be able to functionally deal with it. It's just that they have a sort of system of what you pay guys in certain positions, and outside back is not a bellwether position where you're going to drop 500,000, $1 million at. That's just not how the Hunts build rosters. So, I'm glad Reggie's getting paid. The kid deserves to get paid, but he also deserves the move that he wants. And I worry that it'll impact his national team future with the World Cup 2 years away, and he's stuck here in MLS and maybe in his mind not progressing when he's competing against two guys that are now going to be, Dest and Yedlin over there in Europe.
Stupid COVID ruining his national team prospects.
It's possible, yeah.
Speaking of stupid things ruining national team prospects, Fabian Castillo was talking about FC Dallas recently.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fact that he said that he would have wanted to come back here someday. First of all, he tried to spin a little bit that he left, at least if I understood the translation correctly. He left to win titles, which I find disingenuous because, you don't dash out in the middle of the night without permission for titles to Trabzonspor.
If he didn't leave, he was realistically about to win a treble.
Yeah, I mean, that team was loaded and cruising, and his leaving derailed what was a magnificent season and had a chance to win some. So I find that to be garbage. So he says he wants to come back someday. I'm going to say no, and you could say no just for the burned bridges, but I'm going to say no for a different reason, which is that he's 28. So someday is what, 30, 31, 32, and you're talking about a player whose game is built on speed. His game is built on getting behind guys and tearing defenses apart from wide and from deep. As your speed falls off, and he's already started to fall off, that becomes ineffective. Guys that play deep into their 30s do so because of their mind or their touch, not because of their pace. So if your pace is your bag, it's going to fall off. So like today he would have value, but he's not coming today. And so I think it's a non-starter, and he's just trying to get over his regrets he has because he blew it leaving when he did to a stupid club. And I think he wishes he hadn't done it, and now he's trying to backpedal it, and I think it's a mess, and I don't want him, and I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah, I think there is a rule of thumb: second spells never work well, and that's not just because someone tries to play Kenny Cooper out on the wing where he doesn't belong. It's just I don't know. It never seems to work out that well, but. Like you say, he's fallen off so much as a player. He's been a walking injury. He seems to have caught the Mauro Diaz bug. Fractured his ankle twice, which was pretty spectacular. It's for a guy who was frustrating as hell anyway. Just for the fact that he would Forrest Gump it and run through the boards at the end line, run up the beer garden, up the stairs, out the stadium, out through the training ground, and end up stopping somewhere in Prosper with the ball still at his feet. Now he's doing that on one leg, or rather slowly. He's got Reto Ziegler running past him. But it just actually that's actually pretty good on the left wing right now. Mascara, when he's hit and miss, but when he hits, he hits. Fafa Pico is looking to do a good job there. Dallas is actually over the hump of not replacing him like for like the player he was, but rebalancing the side.
Yeah, Fafa Pico's been here for 2 games, and I like what I see. I think that they're perfectly fine at left wing, and when you include guys like Jesus Ferreira or Paxton Pomacall or even Thomas Roberts playing as a false wing over there, I think they're perfectly good, and Fafa deserves a good run, and I think he's more than capable of replacing anything Castilla brought to the table, who was, by the way, Fabian, I'm sure everyone knows, a poor decision maker in the final third, in the box, and in life, apparently, too. But Fafa Pico is looking like he's a pretty smart player, pretty intelligent guy off the field, too. So I have high expectations for what he's going to be able to do. He's not going to break the game or anything, but I think he's going to be a more than adequate fill-in and balance to Barrios on the other side. And I think having a attack coming from both sides is going to do a lot of good for guys like Cobra or Franco Jara, whoever it ends up being at the 9.
Sorry, I got distracted because I was just whispering Thomas Roberts in my head over and over again after you mentioned his name.
Yeah. I did want to spin back to something you said in the COVID discussion. And this is not at all political. I'm just going to say that there have been a couple of reports that have come out, and I don't want to hear from anybody about whatever you think about COVID. There's been a couple of reports that have shown that long term, some people have had some heart damage and some lung damage. So that's a new thing, I think, that players are going to be worried about. Because there was a lot of talk about how Dallas was mostly asymptomatic. There were 3 or 4 guys that had symptoms. I actually think that that's a thing, and we'll see how young, fit, awesome athletes do. I'm actually afraid now that there might be a player down the line that a year from now you might be like, I've had my career ruined because of COVID, because I have this lung damage and I can't get as fit as I was, or I've had this heart damage. I mean, we remember Bobby Ryan playing with heart problems that nobody knew about. He didn't pass until after he was done playing, but you hear about players with heart troubles passing in games or whatever. So if I'm a player, I would actually be worried about it. If I had tested positive at some point, I'd be going to see doctors on my own to have my heart and lungs checked just for this various kind of thing, because we don't know. I mean, this is the thing with this disease, right? We really have no idea what the long-term ramifications are going to be for people. And so I think there should be a concern there. And maybe I don't mean to be a negative Nelly or a panic causer, but just this past week, I've been thinking about that, and it's like, oof, man, I would be worried if I was an athlete and I got it. Not for my short-term health, for my long-term health.
No, I think you're completely on the money there, and it's worth pointing out they do have to do a cardiovascular test, pass a league mandated cardiovascular test just to return to training. But I mean, people that I've known that have got it have said it's 6 weeks where you're just kind of, you're better, but you're not yourself. You're not. Yeah. You're out of breath and all this, that, and the other. If you're doing if you're a player doing lung busting runs and a lot of cardio, then that's a significant issue. And you look at players like Jordan Morris. Jordan Morris has to go to get his inhaler at the start of the half. With his asthma, we talk about players who would be at risk from damage to their career, and that's the sort of player. Someone actually told me, Luke Cock from El Matador, he actually told me that the Army are looking to reduce the PT requirements for soldiers that get the virus, just with how many people potentially are going to come down with it, and the potential damage and how it would affect kind of like the turnover in the military. So something that extreme a response should tell you really all you need to know about there is a risk of lasting damage. It's not a political thing, it's a reality. The reality is that nobody knows yet, and it's just that there are starting to be some signs that some people, and I have no idea about percentages, can have this long-term heart and lung issue. And I'm not a doctor, but if you've been asymptomatic and fine, or if you've had some mild symptoms or even some medium symptoms, like we've heard from FC Dallas players, they're all fine now, of course. But in the back of my head, as a player, I would be a little bit concerned, and I'd be monitoring this. I mean, the world changes all the time, and we're going to learn about this disease as we go forward. And that idea that there could be long-term damage, I think, is one that they, as a players, need to pay attention to. I mean, some fat sofa-sitting schmo like me, who cares? But, a player,
when you're operating at the far limits and the extremes of physical fitness in a sport like soccer with lung capacity and heart capacity, a little bit of a knock could be a career ender.
Thankfully, technology's become such a big part of the game, and especially in Dallas, with the heart rate monitors and the oxygen saturation tracking and GPS and everything else, that Dallas is probably one of the better places to get a handle on it. But there's definitely further down the ladder where there are going to be players that unfortunately probably will get caught out by not seeing some damage until they've sort of run themselves into the ground.
Hope not. Well, I think we've about exploited everything we can today, Dan, in terms of FC Dallas talk. Yeah. Before you say goodbye to everybody, let me just real quick promote the Patreon. If you enjoy our podcasts or our coverage on thirddegree.net, you can support us at our Patreon, patreon.com/thirddegree. Any amount is welcome. We're like the NPR model, public radio model. If you like what we do, throw us a couple bucks. And help us keep this site going, this podcast going, and our coverage of FC Dallas going.
And congratulations to Denton Diablos Estudiantes for beating the parent team in the Roja League final this week. That was what a way to get your first silverware to beat yourself. Again, sounded wrong.
Yeah, that was a fun sort of support local soccer moment, that the two Diablos teams, which had made it to the final and played each other, and the young new upstarts beat the older dudes. So that was although I will admit that the Estudiantes team is mostly made up of the college kids home over the summer, which is what the Diablos team was last year. So a lot of those guys came back and played together. So it's not surprised that they were pretty good and cohesive and pulled together that local championship that they that the local NPSL teams cobbled together. I love that fact that they got some competition going and played some games and awarded a trophy. I thought that was good stuff.
Definitely, and from obviously you pimped the Patreon. Let's talk about the blog. For more local coverage like that, the Vaqueros, Lone Star Republican, the NISA Independent Cup, and North Texas SC, obviously. Definitely keep up with the blog for what we're covering.
Yeah, big opening day win for North Texas Soccer Club. They look like they have not missed a step, which is funny because they've replaced like half that team. But they still look pretty dang good, and I think they're still going to have an exceptional season. They travel this weekend to play. I think it's Omaha, which is one of the new teams. So an opponent we won't know much about, but it'll be fun to watch because it's actually professional soccer being played by the same organization. So I'll be watching and enjoying, and we will cover that as we cover everything in North Texas.
Well, thanks for joining us for episode 71 of Third Degree, the podcast, and thank you for your insight as always, Buzz.
You're welcome.
Thomas Roberts.